What's up, YouTube? I'm back again with round 2 of the Vulcan Chess Classic. And in this round, I was playing an unrated opponent. Now, he is unrated, but before the game, he did mention that he was around 1800 online. So, me being just a little over 2000, I assumed, I'm like, well, this is going to be a tough game. And I was correct. And so, let's get right into it. All right, so I was the black pieces here for round 2. And again, going into this game, I thought it was going to be a tough game. And so we had talked a little bit briefly about openings before, which is probably what amateurs do. But that's okay. We were chatting a little bit, and he liked opening theory. So I kind of knew this was going to be a little tricky going into the game. And then definitely knew it was going to be tricky when he played d4. And d4 is obviously a little more positional. So and on all the positions that I get typically, because I play d5, are around, positionally based setups. And so I knew this would be a longer game. I knew this would be kind of a tough battle with his online rating. And so I was prepared for a fight here. And so, all right, d4, d5. And he goes c4, Queen's Gambit, right? Queen's Gambit. Now, I've been studying a little bit of the Queen's Gambit accepted, where you take this pawn, but I didn't really feel comfortable playing it here, as more often than not, I respond with e6, which is the Queen's Gambit decline. And all right, let's see what he does here. There's a bunch of different setups here. There's a bunch of different niche move orders in the Queen's Gambit declined, and so I was super surprised actually when he went for the exchange. It's obviously not bad. It's very, very solid, and you really just get a roughly equal game. And so obviously I take back, and we just develop calmly. He goes knight c3, I go knight f6. And then he goes queen c2. Now, this is listed as a slight inaccuracy by the computer. However, it does make sense. He's controlling this long diagonal, putting pressure on h7 in the future. He wants to go e3, knight f3, get his bishop out, and really put pressure right here. Right, and that's kind of his whole game plan, and that's why he went queen c2 early. And it is a weird move order, not common. Now, the best response actually here is to go c5. However, I didn't quite remember if I could immediately push c5 or not, so I went for the more solid c6, giving him a little bit of an inaccuracy back. But as you can see, I have a nice solid pawn chain right here, and everything is fine in my position for now. So he responds by going bishop g5, which I expected. And there's a couple different ways you can respond to this. I didn't quite know if I wanted to go bishop to d6 or bishop e7 immediately, breaking this pin, or maybe pushing h6 as well as another option. And h6 might be the best option, but instead I kind of went for, again, I knew he liked opening theory, so I kind of wanted to get him out of his prep and just be super solid. And so I play a little bit of a weird move, bishop to e6. Now, this is not the best move, and I actually know that the theory goes, for the most part, g6, e3, bishop f5, bishop d3, and trading right there. I understand that's the theory, but again, I'm just trying to get him out of his prep, and so I go bishop e6. Not the best move, but definitely a move here. He goes knight f3, and we're still even here. And now I break this pin with bishop e7. Everything is still equal. He goes e3 as expected. And now I go knight to d7. And there's not much. I mean, this is just standard Queen's Gambit decline moves for here. Nothing too crazy at the moment. He goes bishop d3, like I expected. And now I push h6, asking him what he's going to do with this bishop. More than likely, he'll pull it back and maybe eventually put it on g3. And so, obviously, that's what he does. He could trade here. I don't think it's the best move, as I win the bishop pair. But, it's still an even game. But instead, he goes bishop f4. And now I go c5. And this is actually slightly a mistake from me. it's really, I mean, honestly, I probably should have just castled. Another option would maybe be to go rook c8. Both of those options would have been probably a little better. Maybe rook c8 to prepare c5. I think the immediate c5 is a little bit premature. It's not the best move, but that's okay. He responds with bishop f5, and I wasn't expecting this move. And these games were 70-minute games, 5-second delay. And I spent a long time in this position, actually, because I didn't know if I wanted to take immediately or let him take, right? So if I let him take, or sorry, he also can respond with d takes c5 right there too, which would have been fine. I don't know if I probably would have captured with the knight here, and this would have been fine. Maybe here and then pull back, something like that would have been fine. But also he could just take, like if I castle here, he could take, and we could get something like this. And I didn't really know how to evaluate this position right here. I mean, as you can see, not that he can target them right now, but my king is pretty weak here. And this backwards pawn is always a target. And so I took a long time here in this position, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. But I came up with an interesting line, which is to take, and then obviously he takes back, and then go g6. And g6, again, it weakens my king, but the queen really doesn't have many good squares. The queen could go back to queen could go back to h3, which would have been an interesting move. And he could also go to d3, but d3 runs immediately into c4, where I just take more space. So he really doesn't have many moves, and so I kind of force him to go back, and he does. And again, this looks a little dubious, I think, but I evaluated it as still equal and definitely getting him out of his prep. So in this position, I'm sure, I mean, more than likely, I don't know if either of us have played this position before with an early g6 right here. And just really winning a tempo was the biggest thing here. All right, so he goes back, and then I decided to take in the center, knowing that this was probably equal. I kind of expected him to take with the pawn, but instead he takes with the knight, which, again, is still fine. And then I make a slight inaccuracy, and I'll explain. So I go a6 just to stop anything from ever landing on b5. Now, this is inaccurate because he really wasn't threatening to go there anyways, because anytime he would hop, it was always going to be met. Let's say I castle, it was always going to be met with a6 anyways, which is just still equal. So there's really no point in me wasting a tempo going a6 here. I honestly can't really explain why I went a6 other than just being like, oh, well, let me just prevent you, from going there. But I really didn't have to make that move, so I guess it was more of a waiting move than anything. And he responds with a4, which is an inaccuracy of his own. So now we're just kind of back to equal. I mean, he took space. I think the best move for him was also castles. I think we both should have castled, but we're both still kind of playing it slow here. And so I respond with the best move, which is rook to c8, lining up this rook right here with his queen. Now, I expected him to go queen b3, which is an interesting try. I think queen b3 is an interesting try right here. But I have this nice move, knight c5, and then it's still equal, but it's a little complicated, right, from this position right here. So instead of all that, he castles, and I respond with knight to e4. And I evaluated this as roughly equal again. I mean, this is just a really solid game from both of us. And kind of forcing trades because now his bishop is under attack. So I'm forcing trades. He obviously can't take this way because his queen is hanging. So force the trade here. And again, still. Now, in this position, I did try to calculate what would happen if he took on d5 and takes, and now my rook is still hanging. So then I take here, and he just goes back. And okay, we're roughly equal, but I don't necessarily like my position because this b7 pawn is decently hard to defend. I mean, again, it's probably roughly equal, but it's still just not necessarily a comfortable position for me here. So instead of that, let's get back to the position. I trade. He goes rook AC1. And now I spend another maybe 10 minutes, and again, still evaluating this as equal. I just decided to chop right here and figured, well, I'm okay with the draw here if need be. It's only round 2. I'm not really too stressed if I have to take a draw over the board. And he takes. And now this pawn is a target and this pawn is a target. And that's kind of my idea behind taking was, all right, he has 2 weaknesses, things that I can target. And maybe I can get my rook to c4, castle, and put my other rook behind it. And now this pawn is just really weak. And instead, I kind of go knight f6. Now, knight f6 is the best move according to the computer, controlling this e4 push, and him potentially maybe putting a rook on the open file. Let's just stop all that. And now he goes queen b3, which I thought was interesting because I'm already defending this with my queen. Now he is threatening. I mean, I don't really know what he's threatening. I guess he's just threatening to push c4. But I thought that was interesting now. Something like this would have been nice for me. Just something I evaluated, something I looked at. So queen b3, and I castle. I actually think in this position, rook c4 might have been a little better. I know the computer says castles is the best move, but I feel like looking back, rook c4 is a little more active. Again, keeping this pawn from pushing, because now when I castle, he has the immediate c4. And again, I know this is just equal. Now, I did evaluate a line where I go knight e4 first. And this is the best move. I did not play this in the game, but something like this is an interesting try. I thought this was an interesting try right here where, he can't really do much. He can go rook b4, trades, and rook c7. And we get to something like this where this pawn is really weak, really hard for me to defend. I am threatening a fork eventually if he ever moves that knight. So it's still equal, but not what I wanted. So I just decided to trade. He takes with the rook. I take with the rook. And now I put my knight on the e4 square. Now at this moment, I probably had around 25, 30 minutes left. And he had around 45 minutes left. And he offered me a draw. And I thought for 3 or 4 minutes, I'm like, well, if we're going to draw, I would rather it be a draw on the board. Because right now, yeah, I mean, we're just completely even, and I assume that we are. But you never know if somebody's going to make a mistake. I'm still threatening a fork right here, and he's going to have to defend right now. So it's an interesting position. There's still some game left here. If this was a grandmaster level, they probably would just agree to a draw. But here we are. He goes rook d1, stopping the fork. And now I go rook d8, pinning this knight. No, nothing right now, but just, future pins. He can never move this knight, right? He goes h3. Now, h3 felt a little slow, but just kind of a waiting move. Again, I think he wanted a draw, so, and I was the one that had to prove why I didn't take the draw. So now I go queen to f6, targeting f2, right? And I assumed, and he did play the best move, which is queen c2, not only defending, right, but now he's also threatening my knight, and I have to figure out what to do. And I decide, let's go rook e8 and just defend this way because I'm still threatening this. So now, again, his positions or his pieces are at least a little bit passive, right, in this position. So, okay, now rook to b1. And now he's targeting my pawn. So we're just slowly trying to improve our pieces. Again, dead draw. And in this position, I thought for probably another 5 more minutes, because now I'm starting to realize, well, I probably should have taken the draw because this is kind of going to be a difficult position to defend. I go knight to d6. And now he pins me, rook b6, which I knew when I played knight d6 that was his next move. And now he's really putting a lot of pressure here. So anticipating that, I immediately play queen to e7, the best move in the position. And now he pins me again with queen to c5. And an interesting try would have been knight to c8 here. where we get something like this. I'm still defending the pawn. I do have a pawn majority over here, which gives me, I guess, some chances, but it's really just an equal position. So instead of that, I go rook to d8. And now that's slight inaccuracy, and the computer gives him just a slight edge, as you can tell. Right, just a slight edge in this endgame if we were to reach it. And then he makes an interesting move. So I go rook to d8, and now he goes knight to c2. Now his idea is to, I'm assuming, put his knight here onto d5, and then maybe push his pawns and really solidify his knight on the d5 square. And so I came up with an interesting idea. Now, over the board, I felt like this was a strong idea. It turns out it's the wrong idea, but it felt strong when I played it. And I played the move a5. Now, a5 is actually an okay move. And you're probably thinking, well, you're just hanging a pawn. Well, I'm actually stopping him from his idea of going knight to b4. I really don't want his knight on this d5 square where I'm just under too much pressure, and I would just immediately lose. So he can't immediately take it, right? Because he runs into a fork. Now, a very simple fork, but a winning fork nonetheless. So in this position, he plays knight to a3 instead. And I thought that was still a good move. He wants to go knight b5, right? Which is another good move. So to prevent any issues with this pin right here, right? With his pin on my queen, I go queen to d7. Just a very calm move, the best move in the position, moving out of this pin, and now on knight b5, I can take and just be comfortable, right? And again, it's just even, and he then plays queen x a5. So now I'm down a pawn. Now this position is still equal, right? It is still a very tricky position, as you will see. And I have some tricks that I'm kind of lining up, starting with queen to c7. So now I pin him, right? And that's another idea behind the move a5, is now he's in a pin, and he has to figure out a way to get out. Now, you obviously can't go queen b5. I'll just take, right? So he's going to have a hard time. You can't really go queen to a7, because then that runs into a fork. So you can't really, you're having a hard time finding moves here. And the only move in this position, actually, is the very calm g3, which is a very hard move to find over the board. And if you don't find this move, you are just losing. I mean, if you don't find g3 in this position, you are just losing. So he blunders immediately. He does not find the move. So again, g3 or g4, anything to give your king some safe squares, because what you are kind of having a hard time seeing, if you didn't see it already, is I'm threatening a check here. The knight is hanging. I'm also indirectly looking and covering this with a back rank checkmate threat. And he does not find the best move. He goes queen b4, which is logical. Again, he saw his knight was hanging. This stops me from winning this knight with a check. And that's a huge blunder, right? That is a huge blunder, and it's a huge blunder for a couple reasons, but the biggest reason being that I find the best move in the position, knight to c8, a backwards knight move, and this just wins the game on the spot. I'm threatening his rook, and if he does anything, like let's say he takes on b7, it's just a mate in 2. I mean, there's nothing to be done here. And so now he goes g3, and just loses a piece and resigns. And so, again, this was a very, very good game for my opponent. I knew it was going to be a tough game, but yeah, this was just an interesting move. Now, just to prove the point, g3, of why it works, because now when I check, you're like, oh, well, you're just winning, right? You're just winning this knight. Well, not really, because now when I take the knight, he has a beautiful move, and I don't know if he would have found this or not, but rook to b3. Rook to b3, keeping it even. Now when I take his rook, he takes my rook. I'm forced to move, and now we're just even here, right? This is just an even position. Now pawns are back to even, and the computer finds just a ridiculous line that I don't know if either one of us would have found in the amateur section. But like I said, instead he goes queen to b4, a logical move, and doesn't realize that his rook is hanging. And 2 moves later, he resigns. And that was round 2 of the Vulcan. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And let's look at the game review. So as you can see by the game review, I played at a 96.6 percent, which is pretty kind of crazy over the board for the amateur section. And without his blunder, I would assume he was right there with me. I mean, 96. He's probably a little bit above me, minus that blunder. Although he did have some inaccuracy, so maybe it was right around 94, 95. But yeah, just a solid game from both of us. It was by far, I think, the hardest game that I played all tournament. And shout out to Aiden. Yeah, he's a younger guy, so he's gonna be very, very strong player in the future. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. I will catch you for round 3.